Perhaps the most enjoyable thing about this movie was the fact that the majority of the audience at Sundance seemed completely oblivious to the fact that the film was making fun of them. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my coverage of the 2024 Sundance Film Festival, today I'm going to be talking about the 2024 satirical fantasy comedy, The American Society of Magical Negroes, which will be released in theaters on March 15th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. The American Society of Magical Negroes stars Justice Smith, David Allen Grier, and Bogan, and was directed by Kobi Libii. It tells the story of an amiable artist, Aaron, who's recruited into a secret society with the goal of keeping white people content using magic. So you might be looking at that movie name a bit incredulously right now. I mean, it's not exactly the vernacular that we use these days, so if it gives you pause, that's understandable, and also part of the point. So a little context for those who aren't already familiar. The phrase magical Negro was coined by director Spike Lee back in 2001, and refers to a literary and cinematic trope that makes use of a certain stereotypical stock black supporting character. This character is usually shown to have some sort of deeper wisdom and understanding, or power, whether that's spiritual, magical, or left vaguely undefined, and uses their ability purely to help the white protagonist of the story, sometimes, perhaps often, to their own detriment. This is a trope that's been around for a long time, but obviously one that's problematic on many levels. But despite that, it's still utilized with surprising regularity. So why is it part of this film's title? Well, this story incorporates the trope in a unique way, as a means of satirically tearing it down while also making people aware of its unfortunate existence. So, with that in mind, The American Society of Magical Negroes is a satire, set in a fantasy world in which the concept of a magical Negro isn't just a trope, but rather something based in reality. In this film's world, there's a secret society of black people who have magical powers, and use them in order to keep white people content, with the idea being that an uncomfortable or angry white person makes for an incredibly dangerous situation for anybody who's not white. From a premise and concept standpoint, I think this film is pretty clever. It's able to take the trope and build a fantasy world around it that works to point out how ridiculous the trope is to begin with. There are a lot of entertaining little jokes and film references throughout this. They really rag on the Green Mile here, and there are some humorous repeated gags based on it. This film also features some decent world building around the society. It's mostly restricted to the first act, and there's not enough of it, but what is there is good, playing up the fantasy elements in a fun and palatable way. But therein lies one of the film's major issues. It tries to do and be too many things all at once. Part magical fantasy, part social satire, part romantic comedy, it spreads itself too thin and never fully capitalizes on its premise as a result. Two of those three components could have worked together, but adding the third split the focus too much. In this case, that third overkill element was the romantic comedy. It's a shame, because I liked the rom-com elements here. Justice Smith and Bogan have surprisingly good chemistry with one another, but the whole romantic plot pulled focus away from the film's general conceit, and forced the story into a lackluster third act. As a result of trying to do too many things, none of it really feels fully fleshed out. Not the world building, not the characters or story, and especially not the social commentary. Now, it's totally fine if this easily accessible, easily digestible approach to the story and themes was the director's intention. I mean, this is a fun movie, and certainly much more entertaining than I had been expecting. But I can't help but feel like the film gets lost within the very trope it's satirizing. After the first act, it feels a bit defanged, with the depths of its premise pushed aside in favor of the romance plotline, so it loses steam and any sort of biting satirical power that it hinted at early on. It becomes less of a satire and more of a fantasy comedy that lightly pokes fun at social issues. Despite being made by a black filmmaker about black experiences, this is the kind of film that'll inevitably get tagged as a movie made for white people. At times, it definitely has that sort of educational feeling, though it's interesting because it does so while simultaneously poking fun at white privilege and fragility. Obviously, especially with a film like this, you're gonna want to check out the reviews and thoughts of Black critics, who will be able to offer some perspective that I clearly can't. But judging from the Sundance screening, which admittedly skewed older and very, very white, this was an engaging crowd pleaser. And I've gotta say, if you can somehow disguise obvious jabs and make a crowd laugh about themselves, a fact that seemed to go over the heads of most audience members at my screening, then you're gonna have a very popular film on your hands. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one has gotta be the premise. Taking a trope like the magical Negro and cleverly spinning it into a fantasy premise was a really interesting idea. It manages to take all sorts of literary and cinematic stereotypes and turn them into knowing comedic fodder, building a silly and fantastical world around them. I do wish this world building was expanded upon a bit more, and that the trope-based thematic focus was central to the story the whole time, but it was still a unique satirical attempt. The second pro is how entertaining this movie is. This might be to the film's detriment when it comes to its social commentary, but I was not expecting this movie to be nearly as fun and entertaining as it is. I'll admit that I haven't always been the biggest Justice Smith fan, but he definitely won me over with this role. He's got a number of very funny moments, and does a really good job with a variety of ridiculous interactions his character is forced to endure. Not all the jokes land here, but far more do than don't, making this a surprisingly fun crowd pleaser. On the con side, the biggest issue is the film's divided focus. This is one of those movies that tries to do and be too many things. It's a social satire about a trope and very real experiences people have, but then it's also a whimsical fantasy comedy with heavy doses of Harry Potter stylings. And if that wasn't enough, it throws in some romantic comedy with a romance subplot that eventually becomes the film's primary story driver. Individually, these pieces are all decent, but together they end up working against each other, stretching the film too thin and preventing any one component from ever truly feeling fleshed out. Con number two is a bit of a consequence of the first con, and it's how defanged the social commentary is here. This is a film that had a strong premise and approached its thematic core with fervor at first, only for it to get largely sidelined as the film progressed. This could have been the intention from the start, to make something light and slightly fluffy, but it feels like it got toned down somewhere along the way for some reason, which is unfortunate, because this could have been much more impactful with a bit of bite to it. Instead, it ends up feeling a bit mixed with its messaging, falling into some of the very same traps and tropes it was attempting to satirize. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying the American Society of Magical Negroes, or any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give the American Society of Magical Negroes 3.5 out of 5 paws. Although this satire tries to do too much, spreading itself a bit thin and never fully capitalizing on its premise or commentary, it was still an engaging and surprisingly entertaining crowd pleaser. I would recommend the American Society of Magical Negroes to people looking for an entertaining, albeit fluffy, bit of social commentary. If you're looking for a biting satire, you're probably going to end up disappointed with this. But if you like the idea of incorporating these concepts into a fantasy rom-com, then you'll probably enjoy it. Honestly, with a film like this, I think it's going to come down to whether or not you can get on board with the story's satirical construct. There will be people who find it to be in bad taste, while others are going to really enjoy it. So I know I've said this about a lot of films recently, but we've got yet another one that's going to be divisive. If you liked the American Society of Magical Negroes, I would recommend American Fiction. This is another recent film about perceived black stereotypes and satire. Although not a satire itself, it's about an author who writes an over-the-top satirical stereotype of a black book, only for it to be mistaken for a serious and culturally accurate bestseller. If you'd like another satirical fantasy, you might want to check out Sorry to Bother You. It starts off with some related themes, but I will warn you that it gets very strange and goes in directions that you would never ever guess. And if you'd rather take a break from the satire, you should give The Adjustment Bureau a watch. It's another film with a unique and slightly fantastical high-concept society, or bureau in this case, that becomes overshadowed and driven by its romantic plotline, though I will say that works much better here. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen the American Society of Magical Negroes? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie about a secret society? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.